I've watched this pattern repeat itself for years. Smart people, responsible people, people who did everything right. They studied. They worked hard. They got promoted. Their income went up. From the outside, their lives looked stable. And yet, when I spoke to them privately, something felt off. They weren't relaxed. They weren't free. They were careful, hesitant, quietly anxious. I've seen this in friends I grew up with. I've seen it in family members who reached what they once called enough. And if I'm honest, I've seen it in myself. There was a time when money was finally coming in consistently. Bills were paid, life was comfortable. And still, my mind never fully rested. Because deep down, a question kept whispering, what happens if this stops? Not dramatically, not overnight, just slowly. What happens if I get tired? What happens if the market shifts? What happens if I no longer want to live this exact routine? No one says this out loud, but many people feel it. Income gives relief, but it also creates a quiet dependency, and that dependency changes how you live. I've noticed how people with good income often plan their lives around protecting it. They choose safety over curiosity. They delay decisions they actually want to make, not because they are weak, but because their entire structure depends on showing up again tomorrow. This isn't about laziness. It's about pressure. I remember a friend once telling me, "I can't complain. I make good money." But the way he said it sounded like a warning, not gratitude, as if comfort had turned into a contract. Another person close to me reached a level of income their younger self dreamed about. And yet, they couldn't take time off without stress, couldn't step away without calculation, couldn't imagine life outside that stream of payments. The money was there. But choice wasn't. That's when I began noticing something subtle. Income changes numbers, but it doesn't automatically change your relationship with time. And freedom, at its core, is not about numbers. It's about choice. Choice to slow down, choice to say no, choice to walk away without panic. Most people assume freedom arrives when income crosses a certain line. But from what I've observed, income often raises the stakes instead. The more your lifestyle adjusts to it, the harder it becomes to imagine life without it. This is the part that rarely gets discussed. Not in motivational talks, not in financial advice, not even among friends, because on paper, everything looks fine. And when things look fine, you're expected to be grateful. Not curious, not questioning. But curiosity is exactly where this journey begins. I'm not here to say income is bad. It's necessary. It's useful. It solves many real problems, but it doesn't answer the deeper one. Why does life still feel constrained even when money is coming in? Why do so many people feel stuck at the exact moment they become successful? Why does stepping away feel riskier than staying exhausted? These questions kept returning to me over the years, and the more I observed, the clearer one pattern became. People weren't trapped by lack of money. They were trapped by how that money was structured. Some people worked endlessly and felt trapped. Others worked just as hard, but felt lighter. The difference wasn't intelligence. It wasn't luck. And it definitely wasn't motivation. It was structure. I've seen people with lower income but more control over their days, and people with high income who felt they were constantly catching up. One group lived inside their calendar. The other lived above it, and that contrast stayed with me. This audiobook isn't about chasing more income. It's not about quitting your job. It's not about dramatic reinvention. It's about understanding why income alone never delivers the freedom we expect it to, and why systems, quiet, boring, often invisible systems, do. Not systems you build overnight, not systems that make headlines, but systems that slowly shift the balance of control back to you. If you've ever felt uneasy despite doing well, if you've ever thought, "I should feel freer than this," This is for you, not to give you answers immediately, but to help you see what you've been standing inside without realizing it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that's where real change begins. In the next chapter, we'll talk about why income feels like freedom at first, and why that feeling quietly fades. And from there, we'll go deeper. Chapter 1. Why income feels like freedom. Until it doesn't. At first, income feels like freedom. When money starts arriving on a regular schedule, something inside you settles. Bills are paid on time. The margin disappears. You stop checking your account every morning. For many people, this moment feels like crossing a finish line. I've watched friends describe this phase with a kind of quiet relief. Not excitement, not pride, just relief. One person I know said, "That's when I finally stopped worrying all the time." And that reaction makes sense. When income is unstable, life feels fragile. Every choice feels heavier than it should. Every unexpected expense feels like a threat. So when income becomes predictable, the nervous system calms down. The pressure eases. You feel safe. But safety is not the same thing as freedom. Now, this is where the confusion begins. Income removes immediate fear, and the brain interprets that as freedom. But what it's really feeling is the absence of danger, not the presence of choice. That difference is subtle, and most people never stop to examine it. I've seen people reach a level of income they once dreamed about. From the outside, everything looks settled. But inside, something quietly shifts. Their lifestyle adapts. Their obligations expand. Their baseline rises. And slowly, the income that once felt liberating starts to feel necessary. Not in a dramatic way, in a practical way. You need it to maintain the life you've built around it. This is the part no one warns you about. Income doesn't just pay your bills, it reshapes your expectations. The apartment becomes non-negotiable. The car payment becomes normal. And the routines become fixed. What once felt like progress becomes the minimum required to stay in place. I've watched people become more cautious as their income grows. Not because they're afraid of failure, but because they're afraid of disruption. They don't ask, "What do I want to do next?" They ask, "What can I afford to risk?" That question alone tells you something important. Freedom expands options. Income often narrows them. There's a moment when people realize this, even if they can't articulate it. It shows up as hesitation. They want to take time off, but hesitate. They want to change direction, but delay. They want to slow down, but calculate. Not because they lack ambition, but because everything depends on continuity. I once spoke with someone who had doubled their income over a few years. On paper, it was success. But they admitted something quietly. "I feel like I can't stop now." That sentence reveals the trap. Freedom doesn't require constant momentum, but income-based living often does. As long as money is tied directly to showing up, your sense of safety becomes conditional. You are free, as long as you continue. That's not a moral failure, it's a structural one. Income is designed to reward consistency, not autonomy. It keeps life moving forward, but rarely allows it to pause. And pausing is where freedom actually shows itself. The ability to step back, the ability to choose rest without fear, the ability to say no without panic. Most people confuse motion with progress. They confuse comfort with control. But control doesn't come from how much you make. It comes from how dependent your life is on making it. Yes, this is why income can feel liberating at first and quietly restrictive later. It solves immediate problems, then introduces long-term dependence. I've noticed that people rarely question this while things are going well. Why would they? The discomfort only appears when they imagine stopping, not failing. Stopping, that's the tell. If the idea of stepping away creates anxiety, income has become a leash rather than a tool. Again, this isn't about income being bad. It's about understanding what it can and cannot do. Income is excellent at creating stability. It is terrible at creating freedom. Freedom requires something income alone cannot provide: continuity without presence. That's not a tactic. It's not a strategy. It's a structural difference. And once you see that difference, the question changes. It's no longer, how do I make more? It becomes, what continues without me? That question is uncomfortable at first, but it's also clarifying, because it reveals why so many people feel constrained even while doing well. They didn't fail. They simply reached the limits of what income can offer. In the next chapter, we'll look at the hidden cost behind this dependency, the one people pay quietly, day after day, without noticing. Not with money, but with time. Chapter 2. The hidden cost of trading. Time for money. There is a cost most people never calculate, not because it is small, but because it doesn't show up on a bank statement. It shows up in how your days are shaped. When money comes from time, time slowly loses its flexibility. Your calendar becomes your boss. Your energy gets pre-allocated before the day even begins. I've watched people live like this for years without realizing what they were giving up. They wake up already behind, not financially, but mentally. The day is spoken for before it starts. Meetings, deadlines, commitments, all reasonable, all necessary. And yet over time, something subtle happens. The space to think disappears. I remember a friend who was always busy, not chaotic busy, structured busy. His schedule looked impressive, productive, full. But every conversation felt rushed. When I asked him what he wanted to do next with his life, he paused longer than expected. Not because he didn't have ambition, but because he hadn't had time to think about it. That's one of the first hidden costs of trading time for money. You lose unclaimed hours, hours that aren't owned by work, recovery, or obligation, hours where perspective forms. When income depends on showing up, unclaimed time feels irresponsible. So people fill it. They stay busy to feel useful. They stay productive to feel safe. Over time, this creates a strange imbalance. Life keeps moving, but direction becomes blurry. Another cost shows up in how decisions are made. When your income is tied directly to your presence, every decision is filtered through one question. Will this disrupt my earning rhythm? And not consciously, instinctively. I've seen people hesitate to take time off, not because they couldn't afford it, but because they feared losing momentum. Momentum becomes sacred. Rest becomes something you have to justify. And the irony is this: the more reliable the income becomes, the harder it feels to step away from it. Because stability increases dependency. There's also a cost in identity. When you trade time for money long enough, your sense of value begins to mirror your output. You start measuring yourself by how much you do, how responsive you are, how available you remain. Not because anyone tells you to, because the system rewards it. I've noticed how uncomfortable people become when they're not on. Even during downtime, their minds stay alert. They check messages. They plan ahead. They stay mentally tethered. And this isn't a personal flaw. It's a conditioned response. Time-based income trains the nervous system to stay engaged, and staying engaged for too long comes with a price. Fatigue becomes normal. Irritation becomes subtle. Focus narrows. People tell themselves they'll rest later, after the next milestone, after things settle down. But things rarely settle, because time-based structures are designed to keep moving. Another cost shows up in opportunity. When your schedule is full, everything new feels like a threat to balance. Not because it's risky, but because it requires attention. I've seen people turn down meaningful opportunities, not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. They didn't lack courage. They lacked capacity. And capacity isn't about talent, it's about margin. Trading time for money slowly eats away at margin. Nears your life becomes efficient but brittle. Any disruption feels heavier than it should. A missed day matters. A slow week creates tension. A pause feels dangerous. This is where anxiety quietly enters. Not panic, not crisis. Just a constant background pressure. The sense that you must keep going. I once spoke with someone who described their life as comfortable but tight. That phrase stayed with me. Tight doesn't mean poor, it means constrained. Constrained by time, by expectation, by continuity, and the most expensive cost of all. You lose the ability to stop without consequence. Stopping doesn't mean quitting forever. It means stepping back, thinking, reevaluating. Time-based income makes stepping back feel like falling behind. So people push through, they adapt to the pressure, they normalize the strain. From the outside, everything looks fine. Inside, the calendar feels like a cage. What makes this especially tricky is that none of this feels like a mistake. Trading time for money works. It provides, it stabilizes. That's why it's so hard to question. You're rewarded for compliance, praised for reliability, but over time, the trade becomes uneven. You give up flexibility and receive predictability. Predictability is valuable, but it's not freedom. Freedom requires slack, room to move, room to pause, room to change direction without penalty. When time equals money, slack disappears. Everything must justify itself, even rest. This is why so many people feel tired without being overworked and restless without knowing why. They're not burned out from effort. They're worn down by rigidity. The structure demands consistency, not creativity. Presence, not perspective. And while income grows, options quietly shrink. This isn't something people fail into. It's something they succeed into. They do well. They become dependable. They build lives that require their constant participation. And then one day, they notice something unsettling. If they step away, everything stops. Not just the money, the motion. That realization doesn't arrive dramatically. It arrives as a feeling, a tightness when imagining time off, a hesitation when considering change, a subtle fear of slowing down. That fear is the signal. It's not telling you that you're ungrateful. Since it's telling you that your structure has limits. Trading time for money is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It carries costs that compound quietly. Costs paid in attention, in margin, in choice. And once you see those costs, you start to understand why income alone never delivers the freedom people expect. Because freedom isn't about how much you earn, it's about what keeps going when you don't. In the next chapter, we'll look at the first real alternative to this trade. Not a tactic, not a shortcut, but a fundamentally different way of structuring value and effort. One that doesn't demand your constant presence to function. Chapter 3. The difference between workers and builders. There is a quiet shift that happens when people stop thinking in terms of tasks and start thinking in terms of structure. Most people never notice this shift because no one points it out. They simply assume that effort is the main variable that separates outcomes. Work harder, be more disciplined, stay consistent. Those ideas aren't wrong, they're just incomplete. Over time, I began noticing a pattern among people who felt lighter about money, even when they weren't earning dramatically more. They weren't rushing, they weren't constantly optimizing their schedules, and they weren't more motivated than anyone else. What they had was a different relationship with effort. They didn't see work as something that had to be repeated endlessly to stay valuable. They saw it as something that could be shaped once and reused many times. That's the difference between a worker and a builder. A worker focuses on execution. A builder focuses on construction. Workers ask, "What do I need to do today?" Builders ask, "What am I creating that will still exist tomorrow?" This difference doesn't show up immediately. In fact, early on, workers often look more impressive. They're busy, they're responsive, they're always in motion. Builders, on the other hand, can look slow, sometimes even lazy, because they spend time thinking before acting, designing before executing, reducing repetition before increasing effort. I remember someone close to me who made this shift almost accidentally. They weren't trying to escape work, they were trying to reduce exhaustion. And they noticed that they were solving the same problems over and over, answering the same questions, making the same decisions repeatedly. So instead of doing more, they paused, they documented, they simplified. They created a structure that handled those problems without their constant input. Nothing dramatic happened at first. There was no surge in income, no visible breakthrough. But something else changed. Their days became quieter. They had more uninterrupted time, more mental space, more capacity to think beyond the next obligation. That's when it clicked for me. Builders don't escape effort. They relocate it. They put effort into things that reduce future effort. Workers trade effort for outcomes. Builders trade effort for systems, and systems behave differently than tasks. Tasks require presence. Systems require alignment. Once a system is in place, it continues to produce value without asking for the same level of attention. This is why builders feel different. They're not free because they don't work. They're freer because their work compounds. Most people associate building with scale. Large teams, big projects, complex operations. But building can be very small, a simple process that saves time every week, a reusable skill that compounds across contexts, a piece of work that continues to create value long after it's finished. What matters isn't size, it's continuity. I've noticed that workers often feel guilty slowing down. Builders don't, because builders know that thinking is part of the work. They understand that not all progress is visible, and that reducing friction can be more valuable than increasing speed. There's also a difference in how each group experiences pressure. Workers feel pressure to perform. Builders feel pressure to design well. Performance is exhausting. Design is demanding, but stabilizing. Once something is designed properly, it stops demanding constant attention. This changes how decisions are made. Workers optimize their calendars. Builders optimize their structures. Workers ask how to fit more into the day. Builders ask how to remove themselves from the loop, not completely, but intentionally. This is where many people get uncomfortable. Removing yourself sounds irresponsible, even dangerous. But builders aren't trying to disappear. They're trying to reduce fragility. Fragile systems break when you step away. Robust systems don't. That robustness creates a different kind of confidence. Not the confidence of high income, but the confidence of continuity. I've seen people with modest earnings feel calmer than those with far more, simply because they knew things wouldn't collapse if they took a step back. Their value wasn't locked inside their availability. And that changes how life feels. Workers live inside their output. Builders live above it. That doesn't mean builders don't work hard. It means their hard work has a longer shelf life. 1 hour of thoughtful design can replace 10 hours of repeated execution. But that hour of design requires something most people don't have. Space. Space to observe patterns. Space to notice repetition. Space to ask uncomfortable questions like, why am I doing this again? Time-based work rarely provides that space. It fills the day too efficiently. This is why many people stay workers longer than they intend to. Not because they lack insight, but because they lack slack. Builders protect slack. They create margins not just in money, but in attention. And attention is where leverage lives. When you're constantly reacting, you can't redesign. When you're constantly producing, you can't step back. The shift from worker to builder doesn't happen overnight. It starts with a subtle change in how effort is evaluated. Instead of asking what pays immediately, you start asking what keeps paying. Instead of asking how to do something faster, you ask how to do it once. This shift can feel uncomfortable at first, because building doesn't always feel productive. It often feels slow, uncertain, and quiet. There's no immediate feedback, no external validation, but over time, the effects compound. The builder's work becomes less frantic, more deliberate, more stable, and stability is what creates real freedom, not the freedom to do nothing, but the freedom to choose, to pause without panic, to step away without collapse, to decide without pressure. That freedom doesn't come from income, it comes from structure. This is why the difference between workers and builders matters so much. It explains why two people can work equally hard and experience life so differently. One is running on a treadmill, the other is building a path. In the next chapter, we'll slow this idea down even further. We'll look at what a system actually is and what it is not. Because until that becomes clear, most people try to build freedom on top of effort, and an effort alone was never designed to hold it. Chapter 4. What a system really is and what it is not. Most people misunderstand what a system actually is. When they hear the word, they imagine something large. A company, a team, technology, something complex and out of reach. So they dismiss the idea before they even explore it. I've seen this happen many times. People agree with the concept of systems in theory, but assume it doesn't apply to their situation. They think that's for entrepreneurs, or that's for people with capital, or that's something I'll look into later. But a system is not defined by scale, it's defined by behavior. A system is anything that continues to produce value without requiring your constant presence. That's it. No buzzwords, no hype. If something only works when you're actively pushing it, it's not a system, it's a task. Neat tasks demand attention every time. Systems demand attention once, then follow rules. This distinction matters more than most people realize. I've watched people spend years working on systems that were actually just complicated tasks. They added tools, they added steps, they added structure. But nothing changed. The moment they stopped paying attention, everything stalled. That's how you know. A real system doesn't collapse when you step back. It may slow. It may need adjustment, but it doesn't disappear. I once spoke with someone who believed they had built a system around their work. They had routines, checklists, processes. But when they took a week off, everything piled up. The system didn't fail because it was poorly designed. It failed because it wasn't a system at all. It was a well-organized dependency. This is where many people get stuck. They confuse organization with leverage. Organization makes work smoother. Leverage makes work lighter. A system's purpose is not efficiency, it's independence. Independence from constant decision-making, independence from constant availability, independence from constant effort. This doesn't mean a system runs perfectly on its own. It means the system has memory. It remembers what to do without you reminding it every time. That memory can take many forms. A skill that compounds with use, a process that repeats the same outcome reliably, a piece of work that keeps delivering value long after it's completed. None of these require scale. They require intention. I've noticed that people often overestimate what a system should look like and underestimate what it can start as. They wait for something impressive, but systems usually begin as small decisions repeated consistently. One person I know created a simple structure around their knowledge. They weren't famous. They weren't selling anything at first. They just organized what they already knew in a way that didn't require them to repeat themselves. Over time, that structure began to carry the load. Questions answered themselves. Decisions became predictable. Effort decreased. Nothing about it was flashy. But their life became noticeably lighter. That's the effect of a real system. It removes friction. Most people live with unnecessary friction because their lives are built around reaction. They respond to emails, they respond to requests, they respond to deadlines. Systems reverse that flow. They respond once, then let the structure handle repetition. This is why systems feel boring. There's no urgency, no adrenaline, just quiet consistency. And quiet consistency doesn't impress people who equate progress with motion. But motion isn't the goal. Continuity is. Another misunderstanding is believing that systems eliminate responsibility. They don't. They relocate it. Instead of managing every outcome, you manage inputs and rules. You stop asking, "What do I need to do today?" and start asking, "What rules am I reinforcing?" This shift changes how you experience work. You stop feeling chased by tasks. You start feeling supported by structure. I've seen people resist this idea because it feels unnatural at first. They're used to being needed, used to being the one who fixes things. A system that doesn't need you can feel threatening. If I'm not required, what's my value? That question comes up more often than people admit. But systems don't remove your value. They protect it. They free you from being consumed by execution so you can focus on direction. Direction is where judgment lives, and judgment is where real value is created. Another thing systems are not: shortcuts. They don't bypass effort. They concentrate it. You work harder up front so you don't have to work endlessly later. This is why building systems feels counterintuitive. The payoff is delayed. The feedback is subtle. There's no immediate sense of reward, but over time, the difference becomes obvious. The person with systems has margin. The person without them has momentum. Momentum looks impressive, but it's fragile. Margin looks slow, but it's resilient. Resilience is what creates freedom, because resilient structures don't demand constant supervision. They give you space. Space to think. Space to adapt. Space to change your mind. I've noticed that people who rely entirely on income-based work rarely feel comfortable changing direction. Everything feels risky, but people with even small systems feel different. They don't rush decisions. They don't panic when things slow down. They know something is still working in the background. That knowledge changes how you show up. You're less reactive, less defensive, less urgent. And urgency is often what traps people in cycles they don't actually want. Systems break that cycle, not by doing more, but by asking for less of you over time. A system doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be persistent. It needs to keep going when you're tired, when you're distracted, when you step away. That's the test. If something only works when you're pushing it, it's not giving you freedom. It's consuming it. Understanding this is a turning point, because once you stop romanticizing effort, you begin designing for durability. You start building things that last longer than your energy. And that's when life begins to feel different, not easier, but lighter. In the next chapter, we'll look at why people who understand this prioritize stability before growth. Because without stability, systems collapse. And without systems, freedom never arrives, no matter how much income increases. Chapter 5. Why the wealthy focus on stability. Before growth, most people assume growth is the goal. More income, more opportunity, more progress. Stability is often treated as something passive, something you reach after you've grown enough. But the people who build lasting freedom see it the other way around. They treat stability as the requirement. I've noticed this difference repeatedly. People who chase growth tend to feel restless. They're always adjusting, always reacting, always recalculating. People who prioritize stability move differently. They don't rush decisions. They don't panic when things slow down. They don't overextend just to feel momentum. From the outside, they can look conservative, even hesitant. But that surface impression misses what's really happening. Stability isn't about playing small. So it's about building something that doesn't collapse under pressure. I once knew someone who had a promising opportunity in front of them. It could have accelerated their income quickly. They passed, not because it wasn't attractive, but because it added fragility to their life. More complexity, more dependence, more exposure to things they couldn't control. At the time, it looked like hesitation. Years later, it looked like clarity. The difference between growth-first thinking and stability. First thinking is subtle but powerful. Growth-first thinking asks, how fast can this expand? Stability-first thinking asks, how easily can this survive stress? That question changes everything. Growth magnifies what already exists. If the foundation is weak, growth amplifies weakness. This is why rapid success often comes with hidden consequences. More obligations, more pressure, more risk layered on top of systems that weren't ready. People feel this instinctively, even if they can't explain it. That's why many people who experience fast growth also experience quiet anxiety. They're moving faster than their structure can support. Stability-first thinkers avoid this trap by slowing down early. They reduce points of failure. They build buffers. They simplify. Not because they fear ambition, but because they respect fragility. I've noticed that people who prioritize stability think in terms of downside before upside. What's the worst case if this doesn't work? What breaks if I step away? What depends entirely on me? These questions aren't pessimistic. They're protective. They keep systems intact when conditions change. Most people are trained to chase upside. Few are trained to protect downside. But downside is where freedom is lost. When things go wrong, time-based systems demand more presence, more attention, more sacrifice. Stable systems absorb shocks quietly. They don't demand emergency action. They don't force dramatic decisions. That quiet absorption is what creates confidence. Not confidence in growth, but confidence in continuity. I've seen people with modest progress feel secure, and people with rapid expansion feel on edge. The difference wasn't intelligence, it was resilience. Resilience doesn't come from speed, it comes from margin. Margin in time, margin in energy, margin in attention. Stability-first thinkers protect margin deliberately. They avoid stacking too many dependencies. They avoid structures that require constant optimization. They avoid situations where one failure triggers a cascade. This doesn't mean they avoid risk entirely. It means they choose risk carefully. They prefer risks that don't threaten the whole system. Small bets, contained experiments, gradual expansion. This approach feels slow in a culture obsessed with acceleration, but over time it compounds. While others are rebuilding after setbacks, stable systems keep moving, not dramatically, but reliably. There's also an emotional dimension to stability that's often overlooked. When your structure is stable, your nervous system behaves differently. You're less reactive, less defensive, less tempted to chase short-term wins. You can think clearly because you're not trying to outrun collapse. I've noticed that people who lack stability often confuse urgency with importance. Everything feels critical. Everything feels time-sensitive. Stability restores perspective. It allows you to distinguish between what's loud and what matters. This is why people who prioritize stability often appear calm, not because they lack ambition, but because they aren't under constant threat. Their systems don't punish them for slowing down. And that calmness has practical effects. They make fewer desperate decisions. They avoid unnecessary pivots. They stay aligned longer. Alignment is fragile in chaotic systems. It's sustainable in stable ones. Another thing stability does is preserve optionality. When your system isn't stretched thin, you have room to adapt. You can say no without fear. You can change direction without collapse. You can wait without anxiety. Optionality is a form of freedom most people don't recognize until they lose it. Growth-first systems trade optionality for speed. Stability. First systems protect it. Over time, protected optionality becomes leverage. You're not forced to accept every opportunity. You're not pressured to maintain appearances. You're not dependent on constant validation. That independence changes how you relate to money. Money stops being something you chase. It becomes something that supports the structure you've built. This is why the wealthy often appear patient. They're not waiting because they're unsure. They're waiting because they don't need to rush. Their systems can afford to wait. That patience looks boring from the outside. But boring is often what durability looks like. The irony is that stability-first thinking often leads to better growth in the long run. Because growth that emerges from stable foundations doesn't need to be repaired. It doesn't create hidden stress. It doesn't demand constant recalibration. It fits. Most people learn this lesson backwards. They grow first, then scramble to stabilize. Often under pressure, often after damage is done. Stability. First thinkers invert that sequence. They stabilize early, then allow growth to happen naturally. This doesn't mean growth is guaranteed. It means failure is survivable, and survivability is what keeps people in the game long enough to benefit from compounding. Freedom isn't built by maximizing speed, it's built by minimizing fragility. Stability reduces fragility, and reduced fragility changes everything. In the next chapter, we'll look at how this stability shows up in the wealthy's relationship with money itself. Not as an obsession, not as a scoreboard, but as a calm, functional tool, one that supports freedom rather than consuming it. Chapter 6. The calm relationship the wealthy have with money. One of the most noticeable differences between people who feel free and people who feel trapped is not how much money they have, it's how they relate to it. I've observed that people who struggle financially often think about money constantly, not because they're irresponsible, but because money feels urgent. It demands attention, it creates pressure, it shapes decisions before they're fully formed. In contrast, people who have built stable structures around money tend to interact with it differently. They're calmer, not careless, not indifferent, just calm. Money doesn't dominate their thinking. It doesn't dictate their mood. It doesn't rush them. That calmness is not personality, it's structure. When money is tied directly to survival and constant output, the nervous system stays alert. Every expense feels personal. Every fluctuation feels threatening. But when money flows through systems that don't depend on constant effort, the emotional charge fades. I've seen people who earn less but sleep better, and people who earn more but stay tense. The difference wasn't discipline, it was dependency. When your life depends on money arriving on a specific schedule, money becomes loud. It speaks first, it speaks often, and it rarely speaks gently. This is why many people feel anxious even when they're doing well. They're not afraid of being poor, they're afraid of interruption. What if something breaks? What if momentum slows? What if I can't keep up? Those questions don't disappear with higher income. They often get louder, because more income usually comes with more commitments. The bigger fixed costs, higher expectations, more complexity. The wealthy, in contrast, tend to structure their lives so that money plays a quieter role. Not because they don't care about it, but because they don't need it to validate their decisions. They don't check their balance before every choice. They don't panic when expenses rise temporarily. They don't feel the urge to prove anything through spending. Their relationship with money is functional, not emotional. I once noticed this difference in a small moment. Someone was deciding whether to take time off. There was no dramatic calculation, no visible stress. They simply checked whether the structure could absorb it. When the answer was yes, the decision was easy. That ease is revealing. For many people, decisions about money feel heavy because money carries meaning. It represents security, status, worth, progress. When money carries meaning, it also carries fear. Losing money doesn't just feel like losing resources. It feels like losing identity, but people who have built systems that separate value from presence experience money differently. Money becomes a tool, a signal, a resource, not a scoreboard. This separation is critical. When money stops defining your sense of self, your decisions change. You don't chase what looks impressive. You don't avoid what feels unfamiliar. You don't stay in situations that drain you simply because they pay well. Calm people don't rush money, and money doesn't rush them. That mutual lack of urgency creates space. Space to think clearly. Space to say no. Space to wait. I've noticed that the calmest people with money often delay decisions longer than others expect. Not because they're indecisive, but because they're not under pressure. Pressure distorts judgment. Calm restores it. When money isn't screaming for attention, you can hear other signals. Fatigue, misalignment, curiosity. These signals matter more than spreadsheets. Another aspect of this calm relationship is restraint. People with stable systems don't need to extract maximum value from every opportunity. They don't feel compelled to say yes just because something is profitable. They evaluate opportunities based on fit, not fear. Does this add fragility? Does this demand constant attention? Does this reduce margin? If the answer is yes, they pass. From the outside, this can look like missed opportunities. But over time, it reveals itself as selectivity. Selectivity preserves energy. Energy preserves clarity. Clarity preserves freedom. This is why many wealthy people appear boring in their financial behavior. They don't chase trends. They don't make dramatic moves. They don't talk about money constantly. Their calm is not accidental. It's the result of structures that reduce emotional exposure. Money is powerful when it's quiet. When it's loud, it controls behavior. When it's quiet, it supports it. I've also noticed that calm people rarely argue about money. They don't need to justify their choices. They don't need external validation, because their decisions are supported by systems, not opinions. This creates a sense of internal authority. They trust their structures. They trust their buffers. They trust their margin. And trust changes how you experience uncertainty. Uncertainty doesn't disappear, but it becomes manageable. Instead of triggering panic, it triggers assessment. What changes? What holds? What adapts? That mindset is impossible to maintain when money is tightly coupled to daily effort. In those situations, uncertainty demands immediate reaction. Reaction drains energy. Energy loss reduces perspective. It becomes a cycle. The wealthy break that cycle by designing money to be boring, predictable, contained, unemotional, not exciting, not dramatic. Boring money supports interesting lives. This calm relationship also changes how people handle mistakes. When money is emotionally charged, mistakes feel catastrophic. They create shame. They create urgency. But when money flows through resilient systems, mistakes become data. They're inconvenient, not identity-threatening. That difference encourages experimentation. People try small things. They adjust. They learn. Without panic. Calm money invites learning. Anxious money demands perfection. Perfection is exhausting. Learning is sustainable. This is why calm people often improve faster over time. They're not afraid of small errors. They're afraid of fragile structures. And they design accordingly. Ultimately, the calm relationship the wealthy have with money is not about confidence. It's about containment. Money stays within its role. It doesn't leak into self-worth. It doesn't dominate decision-making. It doesn't define success. It supports a structure designed for continuity. And when continuity is what creates freedom. Freedom to pause. Freedom to choose. Freedom to live without constant financial noise. In the next chapter, we'll explore how people begin building toward this calm. Not by making dramatic changes, but by starting small, quietly, and without pressure. Because the most durable shifts rarely announce themselves. Chapter 7. Starting small, building systems without pressure. Most people assume change has to be dramatic to be real. They imagine quitting, reinventing, starting over from scratch. That belief alone keeps many people stuck. Because when change feels heavy, it gets postponed. I've noticed that the people who actually shift their lives rarely do it in bold moves. They do it quietly, almost privately. They don't announce anything. They don't disrupt everything at once. They start small. And that smallness is not weakness, it's intelligence. Large changes create pressure. Pressure forces speed. Speed amplifies mistakes. Small changes create space. Space allows learning. Learning allows adjustment. Adjustment allows durability. This is why people who build lasting systems rarely feel rushed at the beginning. They're not trying to escape their current situation. They're trying to reduce strain. I've seen people attempt to build systems by taking on too much at once. New tools, new projects, new commitments layered on top of an already full life. The result is predictable. They burn out before anything stabilizes. Not because systems don't work, but because pressure sabotages design. Pressure pushes people back into reaction, and reaction is the opposite of system building. Systems require calm attention. They require noticing repetition, noticing friction, noticing where energy leaks. Those things only become visible when you're not rushing. This is why starting small matters so much. Small systems don't demand belief. They don't require confidence. They don't ask for permission. They simply ask for consistency. And I once watched someone begin by making a very modest change. They noticed a task they repeated every week. Same decisions, same explanations, same outcomes. Instead of accepting it as normal, they asked a quiet question. How can this happen with less involvement from me? They didn't solve it perfectly. They just reduced repetition slightly. That reduction freed a small pocket of time. That time was reinvested into reducing another repetition. Over months, something subtle happened. Their workload didn't disappear, but it changed shape. Less urgency, more predictability, more room to think. Nothing about it looked impressive from the outside, but inside their life, the pressure eased. That's how systems usually begin. Not with ambition, with irritation. Irritation at doing the same thing over and over. Now, instead of tolerating that irritation, builders listen to it. They don't ask, how do I work harder? They ask, why does this require me every time? That question leads to leverage, and leverage doesn't need to be large to matter. Even small leverage compounds. 5 minutes saved every day becomes hours. Hours become clarity. Clarity becomes better decisions. This is why starting small is not just practical. It's strategic. Small systems are forgiving. If they fail, nothing collapses. If they're imperfect, they can be refined. If they take time, no one panics. Contrast that with large, pressured systems. They demand immediate results. They punish mistakes. They create stress before stability. Stress narrows attention. Narrow attention produces fragile structures. This is why many people associate system building with frustration. They tried to do too much, too fast. They expected relief immediately. But systems don't relieve pressure instantly. They reduce it gradually. That gradual reduction is what makes it sustainable. Another advantage of starting small is psychological. Small systems don't threaten identity. You don't have to see yourself differently to begin. You don't have to abandon what already works. You simply improve the structure around it. This matters because identity change lags behind behavior change. If you wait to feel ready, you'll wait indefinitely. But if you act in small, low-risk ways, identity adjusts naturally. You begin to trust the process. I've noticed that people who succeed with systems rarely talk about motivation. They talk about removing friction. They don't try to push themselves forward. They design environments that pull them along. That design mindset starts small. One decision, one process, one piece of work that doesn't need repeating. Over time, these small decisions stack, not visibly, but structurally. And structure is what supports freedom. Freedom is not built through bursts of effort. It's built through reduction of dependency. Every small system reduces dependency slightly. Dependency on time, dependency on energy, dependency on mood. That reduction is cumulative. This is also why people who start small tend to stay consistent. There's no pressure to win, no urgency to prove anything. The work feels neutral. Neutral work is easy to return to. Dramatic work demands emotional energy. Neutral work just needs attention. Attention is renewable. Emotion is not. I've seen people build quiet systems alongside full-time jobs, not to escape them immediately, but to soften their edges. The job becomes less heavy when it's no longer the only structure supporting life. Even a small alternative changes how the primary one feels. You're less reactive, less fearful, less trapped. That emotional shift happens long before any visible outcome. And that's important, because by the time outcomes appear, the internal transformation has already taken place. People often think freedom arrives with results. In reality, freedom arrives with structure. Results are just confirmation. Starting small also protects patience. When expectations are modest, progress feels satisfying instead of disappointing. You don't measure success by speed, you measure it by stability. Is this still working when I'm tired? Does this still function when I step back? If the answer is yes, you're building something real. Most people abandon systems because they expect excitement. But systems are not exciting. They're reassuring. They don't create spikes. They create floors. And floors matter more than ceilings. A high ceiling with no floor is dangerous. A solid floor allows gradual ascent. This is why people who start small often end up building more than those who start big. They're not chasing momentum. They're building footing. Footing supports weight. Weight supports growth. Another thing I've noticed is that starting small reduces comparison. There's nothing to compare. No public milestones. No visible markers. The work becomes personal, and personal work tends to last. When no one is watching, decisions are cleaner. You're less tempted to overreach, less tempted to impress. You build what you need, not what looks good. That alignment makes systems fit naturally into life. They don't compete with it, they support it. This is the quiet advantage of starting small. You don't feel like you're building a second life. You feel like you're improving the one you already have. And that feeling is crucial, because freedom that feels separate from life creates tension. Freedom that grows within life feels natural. By the time people realize something meaningful has changed, the pressure is already gone. They don't wake up one day feeling free. They notice one day that they're less constrained. They don't panic when things slow down. They don't rush decisions. They don't feel trapped by continuity. That's when it becomes clear the system doesn't need to be large. It just needs to be reliable. Reliable systems don't demand belief. They earn trust through repetition. And trust is what allows people to loosen their grip. Loosening your grip on time, on income, on urgency. That's when freedom begins to show up. Not as a dramatic shift, but as a steady, quiet presence. In the final chapter, we'll bring this full circle. We'll look at the deeper shift that happens when people stop identifying as earners and begin seeing themselves as owners of structure. Because that identity change is what makes everything we've discussed permanent. Chapter 8. When you stop being an earner and start becoming an owner, there is a moment when something deeper shifts. It doesn't happen when income reaches a certain number. It doesn't happen when a system finally works perfectly. And it doesn't arrive with applause. It happens quietly in how you see yourself. For a long time, most people live as earners. They earn money. They earn approval. They earn stability. Earning becomes an identity. You show up. You perform. You are rewarded. There's nothing wrong with this stage. It's where everyone starts. But earning has a ceiling that few people recognize until they hit it. That ceiling isn't income, it's dependence. As long as you see yourself primarily as an earner, your value feels tied to output. Your sense of safety feels tied to continuation. Your future feels tied to momentum. You may build systems, you may reduce pressure, you may gain margin, but until identity shifts, something remains fragile. I've noticed that people who truly feel free speak differently about their work. Not proudly, not defensively. Simply, neutrally. They don't say, "I have to keep this going." They say, "This continues." That difference is subtle, but profound. An earner asks, "What do I need to do next?" An owner asks, "What do I own that keeps working?" Ownership here doesn't mean legal structures or assets in the traditional sense. It means ownership of structure, ownership of processes, ownership of decisions that repeat without constant intervention. This shift changes how people relate to effort. Earners feel responsible for every outcome. Owners feel responsible for design. Design is calmer than execution. Execution demands energy every time. Design demands thought once, then observation. I've seen people who still worked hard but felt completely different once they crossed this line. They stopped rushing. They stopped proving. They stopped tying self-worth to productivity, not because they became detached, but because their identity expanded. They no longer saw themselves as the engine. They saw themselves as the architect. Architects don't lay every brick. They ensure the structure stands. That perspective removes a great deal of pressure. When something slows down, an earner feels panic. An owner feels curiosity. What's causing this? What needs adjustment? What part of the structure is asking for attention? This curiosity replaces fear. And fear is what keeps people stuck in earning mode long after they've outgrown it. Another thing that changes is patience. Earners are rewarded for speed. Owners are rewarded for durability. When durability becomes the goal, timelines stretch naturally. You stop asking, "How fast can this grow?" You start asking, "How long can this last?" That question reshapes behavior. You take fewer shortcuts. You avoid brittle wins. You choose boring consistency over exciting volatility. From the outside, this can look like settling, but it isn't. It's commitment to longevity. I've noticed that owners rarely talk about exit plans. Not because they're trapped, but because they're not desperate to escape. Their structures serve them. They can step back without collapse. They can step forward without pressure. That balance is what most people mean when they talk about freedom. Freedom is not absence of work. It's absence of urgency. Urgency is what keeps people in earning mode. Urgency says, if you stop, everything stops. Ownership says, if I stop, the structure holds. That realization changes how people sleep, how they decide, how they imagine the future. They no longer feel like they're racing against time. Time becomes an ally instead of a threat. This is also where generosity begins to show up differently. Earners guard their energy tightly. Owners allocate it deliberately. They're not afraid of giving time, attention, or opportunity because their identity isn't depleted by use. They're not constantly refilling from zero. Ownership creates reserves. Reserves of time, reserves of clarity, reserves of confidence. A confidence that doesn't come from income, but from continuity. I've seen people reach this stage and struggle to explain it to others, because it doesn't sound impressive. There's no dramatic milestone, no clear announcement, just a quiet sense of solidity. Life feels less fragile, decisions feel less heavy, mistakes feel less personal, the future feels less threatening. That's when it becomes clear that freedom was never about making enough. It was about becoming someone whose life doesn't collapse when effort pauses. Someone whose structures outlast moods, outlast energy, outlast temporary setbacks. This identity shift doesn't happen all at once. It emerges slowly as systems prove themselves, as pressure decreases, as dependency loosens, as calm becomes normal. Eventually, you notice that you're no longer asking permission to slow down. You don't feel guilty for resting. You don't feel anxious about stepping back, because nothing essential is at risk. That's ownership, not control over everything, but confidence that things will hold. When you stop being an earner and start becoming an owner, money changes role. It stops being the goal. It stops being the proof. It becomes feedback. Feedback that tells you how well the structure is working. And when money becomes feedback instead of identity, it loses its power to rush you. This is the point where freedom stops being an idea and starts being an experience. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. You don't announce it, you live it. And once that identity settles in, it doesn't fade. Because it's no longer dependent on circumstances. It's built into how your life is designed. That is why income alone never creates freedom. Freedom comes from ownership of structure. And once you cross that line, you don't go back. Not because you couldn't, but because you wouldn't want to. You've finally built something that holds, even when you let go. As I look back on everything we've explored, one pattern stands out more clearly than anything else. People don't stay trapped because they don't work hard enough. They stay trapped because the way their lives are structured quietly demands their constant presence. I've seen this play out too many times to ignore it. People reach goals they once dreamed about. They earn what they thought would be enough. And instead of feeling lighter, life feels heavier, not because they failed, but because success locked them into a structure they never designed consciously. For a long time, I thought freedom was something you arrive at. A milestone, a number, a moment where effort finally pays off. But over time, that belief stopped making sense. Freedom doesn't arrive. It accumulates. It accumulates through small structural decisions, through choosing durability over speed, through designing life to continue without constant effort. That's why income alone can never deliver what people expect it to. Income improves conditions, it reduces friction, it creates comfort. But comfort without structure eventually turns into dependence. And dependence, no matter how comfortable, is not freedom. What changes everything is not earning more, but needing less from each hour you give. When effort pauses and nothing collapses, something inside you relaxes. Not because you're rich, but because you're no longer fragile. I've noticed that the people who feel the most at peace about money aren't chasing an endpoint. They're maintaining a balance between effort and continuity, between involvement and distance, between ambition and restraint. So they don't rush because they don't need to. They don't panic because their structures hold. And that holding, quiet, reliable, boring, is what creates real freedom. If there's one idea I've come to trust, it's this. Freedom is not built by intensity, it's built by design. Design that respects your energy. Design that allows rest without guilt. Design that keeps working when you step back. This doesn't require dramatic change. It doesn't demand abandoning your life. It doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for awareness. Awareness of where effort repeats unnecessarily. Awareness of where dependency creates pressure. Awareness of what truly needs you and what shouldn't. Once that awareness settles in, choices feel different. You don't feel rushed to escape. You don't feel pressured to prove anything. You don't feel trapped by momentum. You start building quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. And over time, life responds, not with fireworks, but with calm. That calm is often mistaken for complacency, but it's not. It's confidence without noise. Confidence that comes from knowing your life is supported by structure, not strain. If you take nothing else from this, remember this one thing: income is something you earn. Freedom is something you build. And what you build slowly, with intention, tends to last. That's where this journey ends. Not with an answer, but with a different way of seeing what's been shaping your life all along. Quietly, consistently, every day.